What is going on, everybody? It is Friday. That means it's another episode of Millennial with Billy and Mel. So we're here, guys. We're live. And Mel did not know that we were going to have a new introduction today. She just saw her face in the back office. She was like, what is this? Because I decided to change it up.
Thank you. It looks great.
Yeah, you know, for someone that's not super creative, I think I did a pretty good job.
Absolutely.
But anyways, guys, we have a really awesome episode. I usually say special episode, but this time I've changed up my words. We have a really awesome episode in front of us. We have a very special guest, Beth, because she's a fellow podcaster. So we're going to be talking about her and her podcast that she just started not too long ago. And I met Beth on through social media, just kind of like I met Mel and connected and stuff like that. I got to know a little bit about her and what she does. And then she told me about her podcast, and I was like, hey, we got to have you on. So, but before we get into all that, guys, Mel, what is going on? How are you doing? I know that's a loaded question because you were kind of talking about it before we jumped on.
Oh, goodness. I have, if you're watching on the videos, I have all of the holiday cards that I've picked up in the last pretty much 24, 36 hours here for orders. It has been the best holiday card order year for me to keep. So thank you for everybody that's been supporting me. And it has been chaos. We have run out in the printing industry, at least around here and in a lot of the mills, of white blank 5x7 envelopes, supply chain. So it has been crazy the last couple of days trying to get off-white envelopes to supplement and linen envelopes, and maybe just change some sizes of things. So we're going with the flow, but it's we're churning out these orders. And I had my ugly sweater party last night, the networking event I told you about last week. I'm excited that the holidays, people are getting back into the swing of holiday events, and yeah, have a family holiday lunch tomorrow on my stepdad's side. There's going to be 20, 30 of us. So yeah, it's not necessarily feeling back to normal holidays, but I like at least getting into the swing of things. What about you?
Yeah, the week started out really good. Yesterday was just kind of weird. Have you ever had one of those days you just feel like you're in quicksand? Like no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try to get out of that mindset.
Like every 2 weeks.
But last night ended up, I went to a networking event and actually turned out really good and met a lot of potential clients and stuff like that. So, the day didn't start off well, but it ended well. And so that's what I took into today. And so, but today, right, like I said, it's always fun for Friday. I always look forward to jumping on here. And so, but what I want to do next is bring on our special guest, Beth. I'm going to bring her up here right now. Let's see if I can do it. There it is. Beth, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I'm glad it's Friday too.
I know.
Yeah, we were talking about that before you got on. We were like, thank God it's Friday, right?
I know.
The weekend is here. And so, but before we, get into everything, Beth, like I was telling everybody before, you have your podcast, but you also work a job, and we'll get into that here in a second. But really the first question that we have is because, I know a little bit about you. Mel actually doesn't know a whole lot, right? But,
no, I'm excited.
Our audience doesn't know a whole lot. And so tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, it's nice to meet you, Mel.
Hi.
I live in central Pennsylvania, and I'm an instructional designer. I've been doing that job for the last 6 years. So I do a lot of work with online training and creating like e-learning modules. And in my free time, I like to do CrossFit, and
nice.
I've been getting into like sourdough and like baking stuff. So
CrossFit, that I did not know that.
No.
So what do you go to like a gym, like you have, or what do they call it? A box, right? Isn't that what they call it?
Yeah. You got the lingo. Yeah, I've been doing that. I did it a while ago before I had my son, and then I took a break, but I've been getting back into it in the last year. So it's a lot of fun. It's intense, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Like, do you do competitions and stuff like that, or you just like work out?
I haven't done competitions. I don't know that I'm ready for a competition. I just do it for fun, but I don't know. I really need someone to like, I need the accountability. So that's why I go to CrossFit to like classes.
Me
But
too.
I think for a competition, I would really need a coach who was going to like be there and like yell at me. So I would like keep going.
Yeah. I've done a couple CrossFit competitions myself. I did one solo one, which it was fun, but it wasn't. And then the last, I've done like maybe 4 total, but the other 3 were all team competition. So it's like me and somebody else. So I really like that because you have that person. It's kind of like a normal workout at the CrossFit gym or the box. You have somebody you're working with and you can kind of push each other. So, but we have Sean on, and he says, you know, he's saying hello, and he says that he knows you.
Oh, yeah.
He's Sean White. So
awesome.
But yeah, so that's awesome. So let's get into it. So obviously you have a full-time career. You know, let's talk about that for a second. So why did you choose what you do now? Or how did you even get into it?
Yeah, so I graduated from Messiah College in 2008, and I was doing a lot of direct service jobs. And the one program that I was working at, they were actually closing the program I worked for. And I got a job with the Senate. And it was during that time I was doing like administrative work, and I knew that wasn't going to be where I was going to end up. Like, I wasn't really interested in politics, like working directly in politics. And I wanted to do something meaningful and do something creative. And I had friends that had gone to like a program at Bloomsburg for instructional technology, and they really loved their jobs. And it seemed like a way to do something meaningful because I had always worked in nonprofits, and I was like, oh, maybe I can work in a nonprofit and do something creative using this new skill. So I went back to school. I got my master's in instructional technology from Bloomsburg. And ever since then, I've been working in higher education as an instructional designer. And I really love it. I did actually the corporate track at Bloomsburg, but I've never worked in a corporate environment. I don't know if I want to, but I'm kind of happy in higher education. But that's sort of how I got started.
Nice. So I definitely want to talk about what your podcast is about, right? Because we started a podcast through a pandemic, right? And it was really, you know, how it just kind of came about was that Mel was already doing it, and then all of a sudden, you know,
I was kind of,
and then we got connected.
I thought I was doing it, but.
And then we got connected, and we just had great conversation. And so we were like, hey, why don't you be my co-host? And so, so obviously we want to know tell everybody, you know, I know what your podcast is, 'cause you posted about it and stuff like that, but tell us the name of it and what it's about. Sure.
My podcast is called So I Got Divorced, and you may have guessed it's about me. But I feel like so many things have come out of me going through that process of getting divorced. And I really wanted to share my experience and also help support divorced women, specifically divorced single moms, get through that process of divorce. And then also on the other side of divorce, I feel like there's this process of really reflecting on your life that you can go through. And so I really wanted to share, you know, things that have really been helpful for me, and then also interview other people that have gone through divorce.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I got divorced 6 years ago. And I went through a roller coaster. We didn't have children, and it was more of a breakup. It was very easy. And we've talked about some of that on the podcast. And I had a segment where I talked with a friend of mine that was getting divorced. And, you know, I definitely think that talking about it and normalizing the, like you said, the stigma, you know, we say the stigma of the embarrassment and the shame and the failure, and then obviously what's next and being independent. And obviously there's a whole different world with children, right? And then co-parenting and all those things. But I have a couple friends that that are going through divorce as well. And, I think it's great. I'm going to send them, to your podcast. So this is awesome.
Oh, that's really interesting, Mel, because I didn't have any friends that were getting divorced, and still everyone seems to be happily married. I'm like, what's going on?
I don't know about happily married. I think they're married. Billy, yes, but there are certain, I've found out recently that, it's, I don't use the word not happily, but I do think that there are some people that, are in situations where they're stuck a little bit and they're not sure, how to get out, it's just, and I think children make it harder because so much harder. But back then I didn't either. I was actually one of the few or only ones, and then I could relate a little bit later on, but I think everyone's situation is different, so it's hard. I try to be there for those people and say that I went through it and I can somewhat understand, but it's so different when you have, different situations and children and all that, so I try to do what I can just to be there and support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was thinking about it too. It's weird. I think we've all, I haven't been divorced personally, but my parents were divorced, right?
Right.
So I can't speak from it from a sense of,
personal
being the couple, but I can speak from the experience of being a child. Because when my parents got divorced, I believe I was 10, 11 years old. So really development years of my life. Right. And
mm-hmm.
I remember a lot of those things that I went through, and it was no fault to my parents, right? They just went through a divorce, right? And not blaming them. But a lot of the stuff that I thought maybe I pushed deep down, right, or maybe had taken care of, I definitely took into the relationship with Megan.
Mm-hmm.
I not really unknowingly took a lot of stuff into the
absolutely.
relationship. And I had to really work on myself to get past those things, right? And I would assume that's a lot of what you talk about on the show, on your podcast. I listened to one. I didn't listen to, because how many do you have right now?
The 5th one just came out today.
Nice.
Yeah. So make sure you guys go check that out.
Yeah.
If you and we'll pop a link later in the show. We'll pop a link up.
Yeah, I think so many people are affected by divorce, even if it wasn't like you said. I mean, my parents got divorced too, and I was a baby. So, but it's interesting. I think as adults, we look back, trying not to make the same mistakes, then we make them, and then it's also just trying to cut that. It's like that generational trauma that we've talked about too, and not have those things that were us as children, then brought on to more, future children too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that was something that I took into my marriage, was unresolved things and perceptions and misconceptions I had about relationships and about marriage. And in the long run, it wasn't going to work out. And so after I got divorced, I was like, oh, I really need to think about why that happened and how did
mm-hmm.
I get here, and let me look at my life.
Absolutely. I did the same thing, but I unfortunately, I think that's lacking in a lot of people, so I think it's great that you're doing this, because I think it'll open up that conversation for people, and just that mindset and that thought process of people of what went wrong, what was it that, and why. We've talked about the asking why and all that. Absolutely. So I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah.
And listen. Is it a video or is it just audio?
It's just audio. For
audio.
right
Okay. Get that video. Get that face out there.
Well, in the description, and I wanted to ask this question because I didn't have this question that I sent to you, but when I was reading your description, your bio you sent me, right at the very end, you say you're an introvert, right? And so starting a podcast, because I'm very extroverted. I don't know if you can tell. Right?
Well,
but I think introverts get a bad rap because it's not about being it's just your feelings are pointed inward rather than me that I point them outwards, right? So what was it like starting a podcast? What was that aha moment that you kind of like, hey, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I am an introvert in so many ways. I feel like I am a little bit more extroverted. I'm an extroverted introvert.
I love it.
Yeah.
So actually earlier this summer, I did a program called Made to Do This. I don't know if you know of Kathy Heller,
Sounds
but
familiar.
she's kind of a motivational speaker, but she has a 12-week program called Made to Do This that I did over the summer. And it was a lot of like figuring out what you're made to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a few exercises, and I thought initially I wanted to do something in the workplace to advocate for introverts, because workplaces tend to focus on people that are extroverted. And if you're not saying something, you just don't care. So I really wanted, and I just think, like you said, like introverts are just misunderstood, I think, in a lot of ways. And so if you're not asking people questions in a different way and not really working with them in a different way, then you're really missing out. And so I thought I wanted to advocate more for introverts. And that might be a project down the line. It's not something
Right.
I'm gonna work with now. But Kathy's big thing is like, do something that's easy. Like, why does everything have to be so difficult? And so we're like, advocating for introverts is something I could do. Was thinking about maybe some sort of training for employers, but that seems really difficult. I'm not really sure where to start with that. But what I did know, go ahead.
I was going to say, sorry, just because I don't want to forget, Billy and I talked about this. I did the Leadership Harrisburg area course. It was a leadership course, like 9 months or 10 months, I forget. And we had talked about the color codes. And I know Billy and I have talked about love languages, but the color codes, we did an episode about different personalities and your colors. Blue and white are more of a sensitive, emotional, and they're kind of quiet, versus the yellows like us, who are very loud. And I've had several conversations recently with a friend of mine about that. And I noticed too that I talk my feelings through. I talk my emotion, my thoughts, I talk out loud. And there's and looking for validation, maybe looking for, I go to counseling, and I definitely, Billy and I are both into self-reflective and improvement. And obviously, it sounds like you are too. But what on the flip side is that, and it could be the extrovert, introvert personality, it could be a lot of different things, but that, when somebody isn't saying anything or isn't sharing, they say, oh, well, I'm thinking about it, I'm calculating, I'm figuring out the right thing to say, or and when somebody doesn't say anything, it makes me uncomfortable. Why aren't you saying something? Why aren't you answering? I need that, because that's how I express things is out loud. And some people, like you said, don't and maybe it's not an introvert thing, but all this being said, I've experienced that a lot lately with those two different personalities and how you express. And maybe there's something though through this leader, Una, who runs Leadership Harrisburg, they do a lot with that type of interaction between the in the workplace, and how to understand the different color codes and personalities and all that introvert extrovert. We never really went over the introvert extrovert, but that might be something interesting that you could somewhat bring to her. And they do where there's ways, coworkers, a boss and an employee, or coworkers, and how to get your messages across and do all that. Because sometimes we're not speaking the same language, right? Like, that's what I'm saying, interpreting. And so that, anyway, I can get you in contact with her, but it's definitely a need out there, because we were doing a lot of that, with the color codes, absolutely, and how to deal with that in the workplace and even just in relationships. So you're onto something, I think, there for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. There's another book that I read this year. So my goal was to read 24 books this year, and I did it. So so I'm really proud about that, because I'm not a reader by any stretch of the imagination. But I read this book, and it was going, Beth was going with a lot of what you were just saying, and it was called Surrounded by Idiots. And it has a lot to go with the colors. The color schemes, like a red is a really dominant person, but a blue might be like an analytical person, right? And so they speak two different languages. So they both think each other are idiots because, of how they talk to each other. And the book really gives examples of how to have conversations with different personalities, right? That not everybody's an idiot. It's just you're not speaking their language.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's much more of a like strengths-based approach where you're trying to find like how people are, like what their strengths are. And if someone is like more outspoken and processes out loud, maybe that encourages other people to generate more ideas. But if you're like processing internally, maybe you just need to check back in with that person, for example, or like give them more time to process.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it goes with relationships too, like obviously, and friendships even.
Yeah, definitely. And so let's get back to, you were starting the, you started that process, right? That, what was it, 12-week process where you were kind of experiencing things and stuff like that. And you were getting to the point where you wanted to create something and you were doing it for the introverts, but then you kind of had a shift, right?
Yeah. So what I did know about was this experience that I went through a couple years ago with getting divorced, and it made such a big impact on my life in such a good way. Like I think I put in my bio that I view divorce as an exercise in self-care and self-growth. And I don't really say that lightly. Anyone that's gone through a divorce knows how difficult it is. And I think, Mel, like you were saying, like when you have kids in the mix, it makes it exponentially more difficult. And if you have a divorce where there's contention and there's a custody battle, like it is not fun. It's not a fun experience by any means. And my podcast is really a resource that I wish that I had 3 years ago when I got divorced. I'm sure there were podcasts available then. I just didn't know to look for them. So that's why I really wanted to start my podcast. You might have heard like your ideal client is yourself, like you're really serving yourself. So I'm serving myself basically. Like I'm a divorced single mom, and that's who I want to help.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's almost like therapy for you in a sense, right? Like working through some of those thoughts, but then also being able to, so you bring on people and you interview them, right?
Yeah. I have, it's a mix really of interviews that I do with others and then some of my own reflections and tips on what helped me through that time.
Yeah. So obviously, like you were saying, with having a kid involved and like you said, it's all these emotions that you're going through. But like people don't understand too, like financially what people go through from a divorce standpoint. I mean, because if you think about it, everything when you become married becomes one, right? Like it's not just you, that's your husband or your wife, but like all your things get tied together. And so it's like now not only are you, like you said, you're splitting emotionally and physically, but now, like you said, those custody battles over assets and kids and stuff like that. I remember going through that as a kid, and it wasn't, and like you said, like divorce is not easy, divorce is not fun. Even like divorces that are still like, I don't even know what the word I want to use is, but it's maybe like they're both people are like, okay, we know we're going to get divorced, right? And they just kind of just split. But I feel like with all that, right, it's still lingering damage, right? Like, and stuff that you just don't realize that is there underneath the surface until like you really start. And I feel like a lot of people, and I feel like your podcast is going to help a lot of people because a lot of people maybe have blinders on and they just, hey, I'm going to numb the pain and not really explore that. And that's bad.
Yeah, I think after you get divorced, there can be this sense of all right, so I did that, and no one's really talking about like what happened. Well, like, what do you do with your life after you get divorced? Like, what is that supposed to look like? And there's a lot of like messaging around self-love, but like, what does that mean really? Like, no one's teaching us what self-love is, and like, what does that even look like, and how do you even know that you've done it?
Yeah.
So I think there's a huge opportunity to do a lot of self-reflection and grow, because I don't want to repeat the same thing that just happened. Like, I don't want to get into another relationship and have it end the same way. I don't want to be the same person I was, like the same that I was in my first marriage. Like, that's not what I want.
Right.
No, you should just be repeating those same.
Well, and they say that happens a lot too, that, but I'm the same way. And I read a book. Luckily, I had support of some older friends that gave me a book called Crazy Time. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's something that changed my world. It talked about from the initial of when you thought about things weren't right, to when you vocalized it, to when you then talked about it, signed the paper, then it was finalized. I mean, divorce is a death. Like, let's be honest. I mean, relationships, when you end, long-term relationships, even with a best friend, it's still a death, and you have to grieve those. And the problem is that I think people don't grieve and they don't move on. And like Billy talks about a lot about unpacking things. I love that. And, I think that there's people that I know right now who are not facing the realities of the, mental, psychological, emotional, and I don't use damage, but I just want to effects that happen. And then it's, 5-10 years down the road when it comes out in like another relationship or something, like you're absolutely right. I think that it's facing those things, trying to get through that sooner than later,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I have a question, and like I said, this happens from time to time. I come up with questions that weren't something I sent somebody, but
he loves to put you on the spot, and surprise you.
But like from somebody that's never been divorced, right? I've gone through a divorce as a child, and this really question is posed to both of you, and maybe it's something that you talk about, and it might be something, I might be wrong on this, but my question is like, when did you know, like, because obviously the day you guys got divorced, right, both of you, was it like you weren't woke up that one day or like, hey, we're getting divorced, right? Like, it doesn't work like that. But like, from somebody that's maybe like in that realm or whatever, right? Like, how did it feel? Like, when did you know that was a real possibility, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I think I knew on some level, like before I got married, but I wasn't ready to admit it. And so I think things really changed for me after I had my son, because things that I was willing to put up with when I was just a person that didn't have anyone else to really take care of, I was like, maybe not so great, but I can deal with it. But they were things that when I like looked at my son, I was like, this is not a good situation. This is not the situation I want my son to grow up in. I don't want him to see me being unhappy. I don't want him to model his relationships after this relationship. And so that was really the catalyst for me that helped me leave.
Yeah, and I somewhat similar. I mean, I think I got to a point where I just wasn't necessarily fulfilled, and I kind of started asking myself, is this something that I'm going to look back on when I'm 90 and say that I lived this life and this is what I wanted? And somewhat of it I knew, I think too, like Beth said, but I also think that it was, I was fulfilled in certain ways that I thought that I needed. And that we talk about societal norms, and everybody else was getting married and it worked and it was easy and we didn't fight and, wouldn't would respect me and all these things, but there were just things that weren't there. But so I knew a little bit, but I never, I thought that it was what I wanted, and I thought that it was right. I never, I never necessarily second guessed it. I never thought, shouldn't I? I was all in. It just wasn't until after that I realized those things. And it was just more or less things that weren't there that I know that I needed and wanted. But yeah, I did also, while we're talking, I put the 2 books. There was another one. I put it into the feed. So if people are watching and stuff, they can check out the books too. That I don't read either, but I'll tell you, they changed my world. So I have to at least talk when I do read about it.
No, I mean, like you said, just having those resources, that's a lot what your podcast is about, is just being another resource. But like another kind of thought that came into my head is like the stigma of divorce, right? And I believe, and I'm sure you guys are going to agree, the stigma against women in divorce, right? It's completely different to what a guy goes through. I mean, like you could probably expound on that, right? Comparative to me, because I've never been through that, but I would feel like that would be the case. Yeah, I might be wrong, but I feel like that's the case.
Yeah, I think there is a huge stigma with divorce, and I think there's a different expectation for like single women than there is for single men in general, and like especially like single moms. So it's funny that my podcast is about divorce, because I feel like it's all of the things that I didn't say when I got divorced.
Hey, at least it's coming out now, right? Better late than never.
And now it's going to help somebody.
And you're going to help people. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, because I didn't know how to talk about my divorce before. And I think when you're going through it, it's kind of like, what do you say? And I don't want that to be my identity. It's like, everything's about the divorce, when it absolutely can be, but I think it's just hard to talk about it. And if you don't have, like, I didn't have any friends that were going through a divorce or had been through a divorce. So I could talk to them about it, but they didn't have the experience to really help me through it. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard, man.
Yeah. I was going to say too, I think it's hard because going into it, I never was really on my own per se. And I think that it's hard. I have friends now that are in situations that they are afraid and or hesitant, and or when you asked about how long was it, it was maybe 3 months or 6 months before you really vocalize it, while you're thinking it, processing it, preparing. There's things that obviously are going through your head, but at the same time, it is the question of, what am I going to do? How am I going to be on my own? And I've had conversations even with people that there's no kids, there's kids, somebody could be working, not working. And it's that thought process of, well, I don't know how to be on my own. How do I support myself? And it's very scary. Everybody fears the unknown, and taking that step, we all know it's just, we'll figure it out. We'll have help. It will be okay. But I think in that process, we're just we don't know what to do, especially when it's financially related, where we don't have our own support system. We're splitting that, and or we're being taken care of in a sense. That's what's really hard. I think I have a couple friends that are like, well, where do I go? What do I do? I'm like, well, that's the dumbest excuse to stay in a relationship, but it is a great excuse, because I get it. It's not dumb, but you know what I mean? There's so many things out there. But yeah, I think that's part of it for the women's side, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Mel, what you were saying about looking back on your life when you're like 98 or whatever, like, I didn't want to look back on my life and have that be like the most poignant thing in my life. Mm-hmm. That's not what I wanted my life to look like. So,
yeah.
Like having that scarlet letter, right? Like that's what you're known for, is like, hey, there's so-and-so, the divorced guy or divorced girl, right? And it's like, I think so many people see it as a failure, but I also see it as like, you know, an opportunity to learn, but like in your case, like you taking your own self-worth and care and love and saying, hey, this situation's not good for me. It's not good for my future kid. You know, it's not good for my son. And being able to, like, there's people that like will stay in relationships and stay in marriages like
unhappy.
And you see it all the time now. You see like what happened, like kids will go off to college and then the parents will get divorced, right? You see it all the time now because like they probably got married for the wrong reasons and all those things and stayed in the relationship too long, or maybe didn't work. Who knows, right? But that's a big thing too, is you know, seeing those couples that, you know, you think are okay on the surface, and then it's like, no, it's really not. So
yeah. Well, and I don't know what anyone's situation is, and like it's not up to me to decide whether someone should get divorced, but I think like I'm a huge advocate of divorce because I think that I don't want to be unhappy, and I don't, you know, it's really up to people whether they stay or whether they go, but
of course
it's not easy.
No. Yeah, I say that too because I look at it and say, you know, it didn't work, but that's okay. I always like followed up with even a breakup after, or, you know, if your business fails, hey, you tried, it didn't work, that's okay, you know. But I think the idea of to like the failure, I think that you, and I always say this to people, it takes a lot of courage to address it, and I really appreciate that you said the self-care and that it is about respecting yourself and self-care, because nobody wants to do it. It's embarrassing. You know, it's shameful. It's this, we got married. Like my whole thing was, I actually got married, you know, we had a wedding, like it was a surprise wedding. But I think that's what's hard for a lot of people is, you know, you have that whole day, you have that whole ceremony, you have that whole promise, you have that whole, you know, that whole philosophy about what marriage is, and then it doesn't work. And that's where I think people have that also like a guilt, but I think of not doing it, but it's also just prioritizing your happiness and looking for the rest of your life, what is the best for you and for all those involved. But it takes a lot of courage to do that. So I mean, I hope people that watch your show, watch your podcast, and you know, I know people that I've talked to that it's really difficult. You're right. It's so hard to do, but it is a weight that is lifted once that conversation is had to something greater, you know?
Yeah. And lots of therapy is.
Yes. Oh my God. Thank you. Yes.
I'm a huge advocate for therapy also.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. And Sean commented, he said, if you learn from it, is it bad? So I'm assuming if, you know, I mean, that's really all failure, right? It doesn't have to be pertain to divorce,
right?
But if you learn something from that and grow from it, yes, it's not bad. It's not, you know, it's only bad if you perceive it as a bad thing, right? Like,
right.
And what you're doing is helping people, you know, talk about it, and I think that's the healthiest thing, is to have conversations about this and say, hey, this, you know, people go through stuff, right? And things are going to happen in your life, and they're not all going to be good, right? And they're going to be bad things. And so being able to have conversations about it, honest conversations, I think is really important, especially in the times that we're living in. It's so important to have real life conversations. Can I
ask, I don't want to interrupt your timeline of questions here, Billy, but I have a quick question about that, because
I told you, Beth, I'm the timekeeper. That's why she just said, said that. Yes.
This is actually interesting, because I didn't talk about it back then either, because I was in a very bad place with all that, because I had a business and then I had to close my retail shop, and it was a lot, and I had a friendship that was ruined and all these things. I didn't really talk about it either. And unfortunately, 6 months later, I got into an unhealthy relationship too soon that I obviously got out of. But all that being said, we now talk about it. I mean, it was how many years ago for you? 6 years ago for me. and we have this like confidence in a sense to talk about it in the experience, and we have the therapy and all that. How do we get the people, and again, it's not getting them to talk, but how do we, from so many years out, relate to those people that are going through it right now, and they are, like Billy said, have blinders on? Because we did, and the people that are going through it now. There's that kind of wall that you have to get through almost. I know from my experience recently that there's denial, there's fear, shame, all those things. That how do you have those honest conversations with people who maybe aren't even being honest with themselves? Because we were there, right? I mean, I'm sure we were trying to be, but I certainly wasn't. Nobody was there for me, unfortunately. I didn't have that support. Other than a couple older friends that were, I got the books and that, but I didn't have anybody going through it my age per se, like I am on now. But that's a question to be answered. Not today, but I'm thinking.
Yeah, right. It's hard too, because the divorce process can be very traumatic, and like leading up to the divorce, like whatever's happening before that can be very traumatic. And I think you just might not be in a headspace to think about, in 6 months, my life's going to be so much better.
Right.
So it's just hard. I think just making yourself available, or like, my podcast is kind of there. Like I want it to be available, and I want it to be a place of support, just because I know how tough it can be. So I just want to be like a little cheerleader. Like, I never was a real cheerleader, but
I know, me neither.
Cheerleader.
Yeah. So maybe it is like lending that support of podcasts and books, and maybe hoping that they will internalize those things, but it might not be a vocal conversation.
Well, also, and we've talked about this, we had a whole podcast about giving advice, right? We talked about when you should give advice, who you should listen to and stuff like that. And so, maybe it doesn't need to be it needs to come from you, right? Like maybe you're not the right vehicle or the vessel for that person to understand that idea or whatever it is. And so having resources, where it's a podcast, a book, people, I mean, you hear so many things of all the resources to help people, maybe go through a rough patch in their marriage to not get divorced, but you don't really hear a lot of the information that, you're like, so I'm divorced. Like, what do I do? Like, what do I do with these hands? Like, what am I doing? Right. And I think that alone is helping people, because just like I said, just talking about it, it helps people.
Absolutely.
All right. So now that we've kind of talked about, your podcast and stuff like that, I want to get into some lighthearted questions, right? We kind of dug deep a little bit, and I'm sure we can go on and on and on, and, about what you do and all those topics that you talk about. But let's just talk about really briefly, the kind of logistics. What do you like? What does your podcast look like? Does it come out weekly, day, or monthly? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's a weekly podcast that comes out on Fridays. And
like us.
Yeah, Friday's a good day. I'm like, I have the whole week. If I need to edit something, I can release it on Friday then. But yeah, it's a mix of interviews that I do with other folks, and like I said, some things that I just want to share that have helped me. The episode that released today is about a woman who was married to a Navy SEAL, or so she thought. So it's really, really interesting.
I might have to check that out.
Yeah.
Can you go over your Instagram and your Facebook for us? I'm trying to tag you currently on a Facebook. Are you on Facebook?
Yeah, I have a group page that's called So I Got Divorced. I'm on Instagram it, so I got divorced.
I see. Yep.
I'm on TikTok, and so I got divorced.
Okay, I see it. Perfect.
Oh,
Thank
you're on
you.
the TikTok. We're not.
The TikTok.
We're millennials, so we're not on TikTok. Or we're not supposed to be on TikTok.
I'm trying to be on TikTok.
My intern is for me. I'll tag you.
So it comes out weekly. That's awesome. And then where do you do it? Is it like at your house, or like do you go to a studio? What does that look like?
Nope, it's just an at-home podcast that I, set up like my blankets and like a box that has some insulation in it.
It's great.
Soundproofing. So
Did you do any like coursework or like research like how to properly, because we did not, so
no.
Don't
feel bad, we didn't do anything.
We're winging this thing, and so but like for you,
we're still working on that jingle.
What kind of stuff did you do to prepare for a podcast? Because there might be somebody that's watching right now that has a voice and wants to start their own podcast, right? Talk a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, so I do a lot of audio editing for my job, so I feel like that part I already had that under control. I did take a little podcasting course where I learned about like podcast hosting and stuff, but I actually started a different podcast in March, and that comes out twice a month. So I sort of had my podcast under my belt a little bit, but I just had a conversation today with one of my coworkers. She was like, "Oh, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. What do I need?" I was like, "You literally need your smartphone."
Yeah.
And that's it. Like,
right.
I could tell you an app, and you can record right in the app and publish your podcast. You could upload one right now.
Yeah. It's I mean, like this whole system that we're using, it's called StreamYard, and it looks like it's production and like we're taking all this time, but I'm literally clicking buttons. Like that's all it is.
Yeah.
And so it's so easy to start something, a light, a microphone, you can get really into it, but I like the way we have it set up just because it's us, it's just who we are as people, but that's awesome. But what is I listened to a podcast recorded in her closet.
Yeah.
Is
like
that
somebody, I think that he listens to somebody that records it in her own, in her closet.
Got it.
Yeah.
It makes sense. If you put the blankets up and stuff like that, it's just like a little recording studio. So it makes sense. So, but before we get out of here, I have one last question. We are coming to the holidays, right? And so what is your favorite part about the holiday season? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's hard to pinpoint one thing because it's really fun to have Christmas when you have a 6-year-old. So everything's very fun. He's really into watching Home Alone, and I love Home Alone.
I love it.
So, everything's just more magical with Christmas. I don't know if I can pick one thing. So.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you my least favorite thing, and it's Hallmark movies.
Oh, yes. Really hates the Hallmark movies.
Oh, man.
They're just all the same. I can pinpoint when they're going to have an argument, right? I can pinpoint when they're going to, be mad at each other and they're going to fall in love back again, right? It's always, some person from the city comes to a vineyard and then they fight.
In the barn from high school, they reconnect.
It's one of those.
Do you like eggnog, either of you? Because I was going to buy some. I just got into it like a year or two ago, but I mixed rum chata in it and Fireball. Wow, it is phenomenal.
No, eggnog just.
Sean likes cookies, making cookies. Yeah. Eggnog just.
Eggnog is terrible.
I just tried it a little bit, just a little.
Yeah.
Did you drink it hot or cold?
With booze, cold.
Hot?
Cold with booze. Okay.
Cold with booze. I've had it without it. I actually like it. Yeah, I'm not gonna drink a little. I just drink a little bit because it's like, it's eggnog. I don't know.
Like it just
try it.
The name right there off. Then it's like this. It's like it's not like milk. It doesn't have the same viscosity.
Oh, it's like heavy cream.
It's terrible. Like I don't know who came up with that, but they must have been drunk when they did it. So. Probably off rum chata or whatever you were drinking. Fireball
and rum chata. I added a little bit, it's not bad. I was wrapping gifts Next thing you know, a Hallmark movie was on. Oh,
Lord of mercy, eggnog and Hallmark movies. But anyways, Beth, there's two things we do at the end of the show because the first one that we do is the millennial meme of the week.
oh shoot! Was this my week?
It was, but I got a meme because
Thank God you did it last week too. How did you know? See, Billy must have a psychic sense that I didn't have one.
No.
So he has one, which is great.
Yeah. So, anyways, my little niece, I always give her a shout out because she said, I was showing a meme to my wife. We were laughing in the back of the car, and she goes, "Oh, and she's a Gen Zer, right? She's younger than
Yes.
us.
Yes.
Okay.
Z, Gen Z. Yeah.
Gen Z, and she said, "Oh, how dumb is that? Memes are so millennial." And I said, "They are, and I love them." So every week we post a little meme.
Millennial meme. Oh, I did it too early. Where's the?
Wait, did you take it and put? Did you not?
I did not. That's why I asked you. It's not there. It's not there. But I'll do it.
Man,
Millennial meme. Millennial meme.
It's loading. But like I said, hold on. There it is. Okay. Let me pop it up. Boom. So it's Will Smith. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot about financial services and stuff like that, and all types of subjects. But like when you listen to a podcast and you just feel super educated, and so he's wearing these glasses and this nice.
You should read it for what it is.
So when you listen to one podcast and feel educated,
AF. I was gonna say that's very millennial. You should say AF, and it's Will.
Yes.
But hey, check this out. I got some glasses just like him.
Look at that.
My blue light, or my green light. Blue light.
Now you're super educated, right?
Oh, yeah.
But also there's another point in the show, and I forgot to mention this to you, so it's another thing I'm throwing at you. But you're just gonna have to roll with it.
More work.
But at the end of the show, we like to have a Mel's moment. And so where Mel typically gives us just a piece of advice, maybe something motivational, whatever, to take us into the weekend. But whenever we have a special guest, they have the opportunity to share, a piece of advice, something motivational from them to take us into the weekend. So, if like I said, not to put you on the spot, but I am putting you on the spot.
Yes.
So
take it away.
Okay, I'm just gonna go.
She's like, bye.
Okay, one piece of advice, something motivational. It's okay if you get divorced. Your life's not over.
Absolutely.
There you go. I love it. Short and sweet.
Love
Usually
it.
Mel rambles on for about another 10 minutes.
Wow, I like to talk.
But yeah, that's great. I mean, for everybody that's watching this that that might be going through this situation, has gone through this situation, definitely go check out her podcast. Like I said, we'll post it in the comment section if we not have already done that. Go check her page out and like that, comment there, support her and what she's doing. But like I said, Beth, we really appreciate you jumping on and spending some time with us today. Thank God it's Friday, right? So you're probably getting ready to go home and hang out your little one. But like I said, we really appreciate it. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can't wait I'm going to go on and like it all and listen.
Yeah, I'm about to go on a drive for 30 minutes, and so you piqued my interest in
the Navy SEAL.
I gotta hear it. I gotta hear the story. So I'm
the
really
drama.
To hear
That's
that.
a good one.
Good.
We need to have more dramatic things, Billy. The drama.
Yes, we've been doing this for almost a year and a half, and we don't have any jingles yet. We're getting there. So Rome wasn't built in a day. So
we did actually come up with the plan last week of what we were gonna do after a year.
You have to have the plan, and now you can execute the plan.
Yes.
So, but anyways, guys, thank you for everybody that jumped on and commented today. We really appreciate it. But like I said, make sure you check it out. But we're live every Friday, 2:00. Make sure you set your notifications for that. And guys, have a great weekend. Make some good memories with your family. Shop local. If you're wherever you're at, shop local. But like I said, make sure you guys have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one, guys.